Hey there, my name is Daniel Pinchbeck, and I'm the author of 2012, The Return of Quetzalcoatl, and Breaking Open the Head, and co-founder of Evolver.net, and developing a new project, Center for Planetary Culture. And I'm delighted to be here today talking to Robert Lawlor, who's the author of several incredible books, Voices of the First Day being one that had a tremendous impact on me. And he's here discussing your new book, which is The Geometry of the End of Time. So maybe you want to just tell us a little bit about the basic thesis.
I should start with how this idea entered me. The idea of taking the laws of sacred geometry, which apply to space, and using them as a method of exploring the interrelationship to three of the major long count calendars that we have. One of them is the precession of the equinox, the other is the Yugas system of India, and then I also just sort of stumbled around and found that the Mayan calendar also is part of the same geometric and mathematical interval system of these cycles. The idea came to me. I was translating a book by Alan Danlieu, do you know him, called While the Gods Play, and it was his last book, and he included towards the end of the book the duration of the Yuga, which there's been a few, like Joseph Campbell.
Just to express to people, the Yuga cycle is from Hinduism. The idea is that there's 4 Yugas: iron, silver, bronze, gold, silver, bronze, iron.
Now those are the 4 ages.
Okay, so this Satya, Tretya.
And Dwapara and Kali Yuga.
And according to most accounts, we're now in the Kali Yuga.
Yeah, we're not only in the Kali Yuga, but in 1938, we began the twilight of the final Yuga of the 4 great ages. So the 4 ages together are, the Golden Age has 4 Yugas, and the Silver Age has 3 Yugas, and the Dwapara has the Age of Ritual has 2, and then the final age, called the Kali Yuga, has 1. So that's the tetractys. It means 10 yugas comprise a kalpa. And so we're in 1938, when Hitler moved into Poland and in the United States, and they had figured out the formulas for breaking open the structure of the atom. That all happened as the twilight set in of the final Yuga. So anyway, Alan was in India working for Nehru and was just an incredible linguist. He mastered not only Sanskrit but Dravidian. And while he was there, a wandering sadhu came to him and said, it has been decided by our brotherhood that it is time for the Western world to know the true duration of the Yuga. And that he was given the name of a Puranic book that was in Blavatsky's library in Madras at Adyar. And so he went down there and he was able to take it out. And he liked living in Pondicherry instead of Madras, and went to Pondicherry, where he just happened to take an apartment on the street that I came in 1968 and lived before starting Oroville. And so it's just those strange coincidences which are really, we're all part of a certain web. And so he found the duration of the Yuga, and he put it in the book that I was translating. And so when I was reading that book, I said, what an unusual number, and I said, how does this work? And And so I started.
What was the number?
The duration of one yuga is 6,048 years. But a yuga like the day has a 1/10 of a dawn and 1/10 of a twilight. So the core yuga is 5,040 years. And this core yuga began in 3,606. That was the dawn of the Kali Yuga. And then 504 years, until we arrive at the twilight of it was 1938. The year I was born. So once again, as coincidentally, I've been involved in this in my whole life. So that is what I have written this book on, called The Geometry of the End of Time, because I use the precession of the equinox, which you probably know is the sun moves 1 degree every 72 years against a backdrop of what we call the zodiac. And at that rate, 72 times 360 equals 25,920 years. And that's called the Great Year, or the precession of the equinox. So the Yuga then equals exactly 2 1/3 precessions. And that means it's in a ratio to the precession of 7 to 3.
Why is that important?
Well, if you, just numerically, if you take 5,040 years and take the progression of 1 to 10, our basic, that's the numbering system of humanity. We're a 5-fold system, 5 instruments of pronunciation in the mouth, 5 sensitivities, and so 10 is the number that really is the containing number for form, 1 to 10, because 5 you get the golden mean, and that's the number that leads to the perfection of form. So 5040, if you take 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5 times 6 times 7, it equals the same duration as the yuga. And then if you turn the 7 around and multiply 7 times 8 times 9 times 10, it's 5040 again. So there's no other number that divides number in that way. And then I did some work with the relationship of the Earth and Moon. And if you take the radius of the Earth and add it to the radius of the Moon, it's exactly 5,040 miles. So here's a number that has a really deep integration of our entire numerical and planetary situation. So that, because I don't want to believe in this, I want to see if I can find validation for it. And once I discovered that, and who could have said, because the Yuga in India, they said, has been translated in texts for at least 12,000 years, and which is the same duration that they have sort of dated the building of the Sphinx in Egypt. So that was the beginning of the.
And in the book, it seems like there's a deep kind of weaving of the different esoteric and mystical and kind of occult traditions. I'm just curious if you could kind of, beyond the numerical and the geometrical aspects of it, what would you say is kind of like your thesis about what this means for humanity and what our future holds?
I did two things. I took the approach that the Yuga prophesizes that towards the twilight of the Kali Yuga, the world will be completely trapped in the mind of man in delusions and prepared illusionistic systems, like money, for example. Yeah. And so I looked that through, and I tried to realize that concepts like based on a science that absolutely believes that the physical has no relationship with the metaphysical realm. You know, we've been working under that total erroneous premise. And so I looked at how the Big Bang is an absolute failure of a system. It's supposed to be an explorative, testable science, and the same with Darwinism. Darwinism is a fabricated paradigm that was put together not by Charles Darwin, but by Erasmus Darwin, his grandfather, in the society of people that were launching the Industrial Revolution. And it was that theory that helped actually desacralize nature for us, so that we would be under a paradigm which would allow us to consider commodifying the entirety of the natural world.
Does this lead to some type of inevitable dissolution of
Well,
earthly
that's what I mean.
existence?
These are all systems that if we continue to follow them, they will definitely bring us to the end of the world. And that.
But is it just written like an unscrolling thing that this happens, or is there some agency, or what could people learn from what you've gleaned in terms of how they think about their own daily lives, for instance, and what they see coming in the future?
I think, like every individual has to do in terms of their own life, they have to understand that death is an aspect, a necessary aspect of life on an individual level, and we have to understand it on a collective level, because this is the terminal point of this stage in the development of humans. This form has already become, is approaching its terminal development in the cyclic process. We have finished 423,360 years, which coincides with remains they have found in Africa of the humanoid-like structure in fossils. And I just think that instead of believing that this technology is going to save the world, and the world is now in the hands of Shiva. In other words, we have reached a moment of necessary and complete transformation. And as the Gnostics say, both on an individual level and on a collective level, it is only death that can bestow rebirth. And that's the message of the Kali Yuga. Ma Kali says, I am Ma Kali. I am the mother who has created all these worlds, and I have a tendency to destroy them. And so fitting in the...
I don't think you're going to get on the New York Times bestseller list with this message, by the way.
I'm not hoping to. Yeah. But I'm hoping for people who understand Gnostic texts and will understand some of the material I have in this book, that it's what will survive the Kali Yuga is our consciousness. And if we can take off the blindfolders of that have taken control over humanity in order to perform this absolutely hell-bent situation of scientific materialism, and where the priests of materialism are lording over a system that cannot but destroy eventually the natural system of the earth.
Right. But wouldn't you also say that the development of technology is an aspect and expression of the evolution of human consciousness?
It's one single aspect of it, and none of this will be lost. I mean, the certain levels of dexterity and thinking processes will remain in the consciousness.
I mean, for instance,
but to make it a science that has set out in its very beginning to prove that there's no metaphysics and that the human being has no soul.
Of
and
course,
so, yeah.
of course. But isn't it possible that, for instance, through some kind of mass shamanic initiation, we could even re-soul our projections of technology?
Not until we go through the completion and the rebirth. We're at the bottom of the spiral, and the kalpa is of 7 kalpas, and the whole Yuga system is laid out. 12,000 years ago, they knew that this was the midpoint, and this break between creation, Vishnu ceases to dream the Yuga for at least another 60,000 years before the earth will be able to rejuvenate, and the process will launch into a new golden age.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, to me, it's also, we have to be even careful about, with all of our knowledge, making sure that we're still not getting caught in our own projections on the situation, which is not to say that I necessarily disagree with you, but I'm interested in other concepts, like, for instance, Lynn Margolis, who wrote Microcosmos.
Yeah.
She looked at the evolution of human technology as a process that is a way kind of it's almost happening like self-organizing. It's almost kind of autonomous. And she looked at the idea from the Gaia hypothesis point of view that it's almost as if the Earth itself is preparing to reproduce the living biosphere on other worlds, and potentially auditioning human beings to be kind of the catalytic agents who bring the biosphere to other planets in the solar system and beyond. And it seems to me like...
And she's the one who said that Darwinism is wrong. Every tenet of it is wrong. And we are not in any way inhibiting the destruction of the planet, and because this system of competition and
okay, but isn't it also possible that within this present system,
you'd like to have it go from end to beginning, but it doesn't go that way. Yeah. You can't. It has to be reborn. I mean.
But isn't that something that happens through like a shamanic initiatory process where you undergo like a dissolution and recrystallization?
If you think we can go from this point to rebirth, then that's your theory. But read my book and see the evidence that I have for these dates and how they align with all the planetary movements.
Of course, but
because we
still
don't even know why the Earth goes around with this system. We don't know what is the force that makes it revolve around the sun. We don't know why it rotates on its axis. We say we have believed it was a historic force with the Big Bang, and that's absolutely disproven. It's not possible. And the only thing that could possibly theory that makes any sense is the ancient Indian theory, is that nada Brahma, this world is sound, and a sound was created that has set things in motion and they follow harmonic laws. And I've developed to show you how harmonics comes completely out of the relationship of form and frequency. And the Earth's form, as I told you, its radius is exactly resonant with the Yugas system.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
well, I guess but we're still living beings, dealing with social structure and the whole momentum of this thing.
Right.
And
just like we are with our own bodies,
mm-hmm.
that must die to be reborn.
Mm-hmm. Yes, of course, but one would want to see people engaged in a process of, moving towards this regenerative state,
Yeah.
So,
and the first would be with a change of consciousness, where we start rejecting the false paradigms which have been superimposed, including the idea of hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
If you go back and study the Aborigines, and you said you did, hierarchy is not a human idea. It's a hierarchy is a way an elite can control the masses, who they usually set in a dynamic of competition and opposition. And that goes on and on.
Totally, but is it possible, for instance, that we could use the social technologies that we are creating as an aspect of the evolution of consciousness and process to dissolve hierarchies into
what social technologies?
Heterarchies or holarchies or something like that?
What?
Well, for instance, people are looking at how the corporate structure can be replaced by distributed autonomous organizations
Mm-hmm.
that are cooperative in form,
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of, at the edges of the cultural framework, there's a lot of ferment about, okay, we recognize this civilization is a suicide machine, and yes, we might not be able to turn it around, but we can see how we would construct the alternative forms for a society to function, even at a high level of technical capacity,
That's exactly right. But those are growths that we will make in consciousness, because it's only consciousness that survives the Kali Yuga.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's only consciousness that could survive anything, right?
So that's the.
But consciousness reifies itself through its projections in the physical realm, and those projections then feed back into that consciousness and help its evolution. So, for instance, you could look at something as the internet as an aspect, it's allowing your books and other ideas to spread across the globe. That's an aspect of consciousness, evolving towards open systems, peer-to-peer networks, open source capacities, cooperative infrastructures,
Right.
And once again, at the edges, there's a lot of ferment, and I think even potential that even at the 11th hour we could, certainly we should give it our best shot to reconstruct the system that we have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But there's forces that seem to just keep that in a sort of dreaming diary. Because, it started in 1960s when they were realizing we should stop cutting down the forests, and the thing in South America, and the work of Maurice Strong, and none of it. It's all accelerated from those times. The trees are falling in Brazil faster than ever. And even though we were warned, if that jungle goes, the climate goes completely out of whack. I don't think anyone should stop doing anything. It's not for that. You don't stop maintaining your body when you get older and you realize you're going to die. You even increase it. But that still doesn't eliminate, when you have a beginning, middle, you have an end.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what the Yuga system outlines for us.
And so what would be the next stage then of our, Aurobindo, for instance, talks about the descent of the supermind as a trajectory that would lead to like the divine perfection even in the physical body.
Yeah.
You know, do
And
you see
I
that
read,
as-
I was in Oroville for all those years, and I read a lot of work into, and I'm not sure if it was on the integral yoga, that was it. He mentions the Yuga system, and he admitted that he had no real understanding of it. I think all that begins after we go through the death and the rebirth and the period of restation when Vishnu recovers the creative force of the earth.
Okay, but what does that look on a physical level? It's a total annihilation of the human species. There's microbes
Yeah.
and fungus.
Yeah.
They kind of reconstitute into some kind of sentient
Yeah,
being.
because-
And then
because-
it's a sentient being that's more collective. Yet it's,
because this is, in the thinking of the Yuga, this is all just one thought.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, we've made this to be, it's just a relationship of frequencies that we have a certain way of cognizing matter, but it's all still
matter as a way of
energy.
cognizing us.
Yeah, both. It's the inverse, right? Because if you count from 1 to 2 to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then how the Egyptians always do it, once you make a progression, you make the inversion underneath it, and then under 7 is 3. And
So some form of sentient, physicalized entity
yeah,
is going to
like the
attain
Akasha
the
record,
supramental
like the
condition.
Akasha record.
But in a sense, in this
No.
current form, we're not capable of that. I
Yeah.
mean, in the book, you talk about these extraterrestrial interference, but what
Yeah.
about these beings? Like, are they also in the phase of cosmic dissolution?
It's three. It's planet Earth 3, Mars 4,
Mhm.
5, and in this phase, the Earth precious terrestrial, meaning 3. It means not only the third planet, but there's 3 planets involved in it, and that's how it's got at this halfway point. That the 5th planet, the intellectual and mental capacities were emphasized.
Mhm.
And on the 4th planet, Mars, the emotional vital forces were emphasized. And on the 3rd planet, it's the bonding of 1 and 2, of spirit and matter, and it's the spiritualization of matter, because 3 is the first number.
So that's the direction where we would intend after the
That's
dissolution
the
and
pattern that will
depersonalization.
continue, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what is that experience like?
We begin a new golden age.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, you read Voices, you read what life was like when, in the golden age period of this. So you get a
And is that a dissolution of an egoic identity, or is it kind of a transubstantiation, or like a shift of the ego to some other level of supra-individuality?
I'm not going to try to. You want to literalize it now.
No. I don't really literalize it, but I think that
the only thing I've done is given the most ancient cyclic system.
I mean, we certainly
that
can
have
see
known.
there's going to be some form
and
of
I'm able to
dissolution.
define it, and
Mhm.
there's got to be a certain dissolution.
It's already happening.
we were talking yesterday about polymers, and that they made these polymers so that they break down now. Plastic is biodegradable now,
Mhm.
but the polymers are not. The molecules are not. They go into molecular form, and right now there are 40 times more polymer molecules than living organisms in the entirety of the Pacific Ocean. And all the fish are swallowing them, and all the seabirds are swallowing them, and the polymers go right into the flesh of the animal.
Mhm.
And
Oh no, it's terrible all over the planet.
yeah,
But
I know.
it's,
All right, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
I'm just giving the fact that this is not just the material thing, there's a metaphysics to this.
Absolutely.
Right, okay.
Right.
And that's what the Yuga system can provide.
Mhm.
A view that there is the cyclic necessity if it is to be a dynamic universe. And you can go through, maybe you want to use, some of the things that you think are really positive now that will contribute to and reemerge when our consciousness begins again its embodiment.
Mhm.
And I think that's what these things are for, not for changing around the mechanical thing. I don't think it can be turned around at this point, based on
Of course, that's just a thought.
What?
But of course, that's just a thought.
Well, it's a thought that was written about 12,000 years ago, and
they were just
the
thinking
Sphinx in Egypt was built to mark that point. And you can read about that in my book.
I mean, you get into, if you go to the mythology of Quetzalcoatl and the destruction of humanity, and then the descent into the underworld to bring up the bone fragments, and so on.
Yeah. It's really in all the myths.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah. So
tell us a little.
let me tell you this: they were able to date the exact time with papyri of when the Sphinx in Egypt was facing exactly Leo, its heavenly archetype, as it rose in Egypt in the year 10,518 BC. It occurred, and it was in papyri that wrote about that as the great convergent point of the heavens and the earth.
But I mean, wouldn't it be incredible if with all of
Could I finish?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. So the pyramid, the Sphinx, turns exactly one half of the precession, 12,960 years, and it points then directly at the exact point predicted in the Puranas for the end of time. And that's 2,442.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more than just a thought, you said, or it's been architecturalized by our ancient ancestors, that the pyramid be built and that it will move from what was proclaimed in the thing, the confluence of the earth and sky, to, when I found that, I couldn't believe it, because I knew it for so long, and then I got that information on the Sphinx and this papyri that dates it, and so I worked it out, mathematically, and it points to the end of time. It's really a temple of Yuga time. The base of the pyramid in feet is one half of the Yuga.
I would see the end of time as like the eternal party.
24 feet. The what?
I would see the end of time as the eternal party.
The eternal
party. Yeah.
Oh, right.
The festival of creation or something like that.
Yeah.
Question for you is, tell me a little bit about your...
Is this the invitation to a party?
Everything is perfect. Samsara is nirvana. Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is the most perfect moment we could ever have at this moment.
Yeah.
Question for you. Tell me a little bit about the what your understanding is of extraterrestrial intervention.
Mostly from Sitchin's work and a number of people who have followed him.
And you think that, for instance, do you think that the Aboriginals were like more native to the earth, and there was some kind of intervention to create the other
intervention
races?
Happened. They set up their beginning in Sumeria. It's in the Sumerian texts, and Babylonian was a Anunnaki, Marduk settlement, and so it unwound from there. It influenced. They got to South America, but it seems the Aborigines were able to continue a truly earthling base culture in which the earth was ultimately honored and respected in every detail and every development of their society. So I think, and they were discovered so late, and so we have an image of a truly human society, and some of these ideas that hierarchy was not.
One of the ideas that I actually agree with you a lot about is how even Eastern mysticism and its quest for an individual enlightenment was somehow like a decline, a kind of, sort of a less exalted, or more, I don't know how you want to put it in the language, kind of path than this pure Aboriginal or indigenous kind of non-egoic connection.
Yeah. And in this, I don't know if you got to that part, but in the Puranas it says Gautama Buddha is the avatar of the Kali Yuga. And his enlightenment, according to the texts in Ceylon, where the earliest Buddhist texts are, happened in 582 BC, which is exactly the midpoint of this Kali Yuga. And his sort of nihilistic idea about the value of the physical world and everything like that was almost like a warning against he was a messenger of the Yuga, that it's absurd to get attached to this, and he showed the methods of meditation where you can get up to the 8th rung, which will be, it's outside of the creation, but you only go there with of the destruction of the creation. The destruction is all in the framework of 7. As it is in our body, the chakra system is a 7-fold system, 3 meridians with a center core. 7 in the front, 7 in the back. So I thought it was really interesting, and I found out mathematically that Buddha's realization with the realization of Christ, which is this idea that we've all honored, is that you have to go through a death and resurrection. That's the real message of Christianity. Not that a man can become a god. It's that he showed that for now, and his crucifixion or realization was exactly a golden mean ratio from Buddha in years.
Oh.
Yeah. I've had enough.
What are you looking forward to?
I gotta go.
No, just in general, a bigger question.
Right.
What are you looking forward to?
You mean after I finish this?
What are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to. I'd like to retire from writing after this book and do other things.
Like what?
Well, I have my degrees I have a master's degree in painting and sculpture, and I somehow slipped out of that into writing, and I want to sort of slip back in. I think this is my 6th book, and half a dozen is enough, and it's about endings, and so I'm looking forward to. Because this has taken a tremendous amount of research.
It looks like like quite an
and a lot of, luckily I had geometry because there was a lot of sort of original relationships that I was able to make because of the background in geometry. And it dawned on me that the loss of form must also have a parallel in the loss of time. And to see how these things interrelated, like Well, you see, the Mayan calendar and everything they're all part of one system.
Mm-hmm. Cool, really great to talk to you. Thank you so much for your
Yeah.
incredible work.
Yeah,
so
good to see you.
amazing. Yeah, good to see you, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.